Welcome again to our Intro to Excel training. This is part of our third Thursday series with Excel. We're excited that you're here, and I'll pass things over to Audrey. She's going to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And thanks to all of you for being here. As Jen mentioned, if you're just arriving, go ahead and open up those attachments we sent to you in email. So you should have received an Excel workbook, an Excel file titled Intro to Excel. And then there's a Word document that will help you follow along with the activities. It's not necessary to have the Word document open, but it can help if you get a little lost or want to go back through and see the steps that we took to get to where we finished, that it could be helpful. So if you don't have the file, go ahead and reach out to Jen. We can figure out a way to quickly email that to you. You can chat, put a note in the chat, and we'll be happy to follow up. So as you're all finding your Excel spreadsheet, the format of this class is really for me to show you some of the things that we're going to do, and then for you to practice along with me. So if you ever need more time or want to pause or do something again, either drop a note in the chat or just unmute or raise your hand, whatever works. We want to make sure we give you enough time and chance to practice these things to feel as comfortable as possible. So let's navigate over to our Excel spreadsheets that you should have received. Go ahead and find mine. Okay, can everyone see my screen, the Excel spreadsheet? Okay, awesome. So go ahead and open yours. It should look a lot like this. We're going to start this training with doing a quick tour. So if you've done a bit in Excel, this might be a bit of a repeat for you. So forgive me if that's the case. Some people are really have not used Excel. So we're trying to start kind of at the beginning to kind of give you what you need to be able to move around and feel more comfortable. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. I'm going to show you this feature in a minute so you can see a little more of what I'm working with here. I've also highlighted my mouse, which hopefully is helpful. Sometimes the screen lags a little bit, but it should show blue when I've clicked on something. Otherwise, the orange circle shows where I'm moving it. So you can kind of see where I'm moving around. So we'll start with a tour. So we're going to start this tour by just kind of exploring the different parts of an Excel sheet. So, quickly looking on the left-hand side, you can see we've got numbered rows along the left, and along the top are columns. These have letters. Any place where you see data in this workbook is called a cell. When you click on that cell, you can actually see the number of that cell show up in this little box over here. This is called cell E7, for example. When you move a little further over along the top, we see this formula bar. So the formula bar will either show you a formula if you've got a formula, or it will just show you the data that you have in that particular cell. And so you'll see it change up here as I move around. I'm also going to move my cursor down to the bottom. We're looking at a tab called demographics. So this is a sheet in my workbook. The workbook is the whole file, and then there's sheets along the bottom. You see I've got two here. One called demographics, which is what I'm looking at right now, and one is called the patterns. We'll look at both of these in this training. You also see this little plus sign down here. If you click on that, it actually adds a new sheet. So sometimes you may want to add new sheets as you have new data needs, where you want to store separate but similar data in the same workbook. So that's a good thing to know how to add. It usually just gives the name of sheet 1, which you probably want to rename. We'll just practice doing that. If you right click on sheet 1 and you move your cursor up to rename, it will highlight that the text in that box, and you can call it something. In this case, I might just call it home visits. You can also, for ease of navigating your workbook, you can change the color on the tabs. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to hover over this command that says tab color. And maybe I'll just color this a nice bright yellow. So as you're looking around, you can see it's kind of helpful for your eye to see these different colors. So feel free to experiment with that on your own workbook. We'll go back to demographics. So you can see on the bottom here, I've got something that is a scroll bar. So when I left click, hold, and drag it, it moves along side to side to explore my data. And I can also click on the scroll bar on the right-hand side, which helps move things up and down. I can either grab this scroll bar or use these arrows on either side to move around. There's also a ribbon along the top. We call these commands and menus ribbons because when I click on one, you see this whole other option appears and disappears, appears and disappears. I've actually got mine kind of hidden once I stop hovering over it. So I'm going to make sure that can stay so we can explore this together. If you have the same thing going on, you can go to the right-hand side of your Excel ribbon. When you click on this little down arrow, it will allow me to always show the ribbon. So I'm going to select that so it doesn't disappear. So we'll do a quick tour of all the options in this ribbon here. So we'll start out with the home ribbon. This is usually the default when where you land. So there's different tools in here where you can adjust the font. We'll explore some of these in a little bit. The alignment, you can change the format of the number, use conditional formatting, do insert, delete. We'll use some of these in a bit, and also some sorting. So there's actually quite a bit on this ribbon that I use regularly. Now we'll click on.
Sorry to interrupt. It looks like your mouse isn't highlighted. Are you able to turn the highlighting on?
Yes, I see it on my end. So I wonder what's going on. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. Are you seeing it now?
We're not.
Oh, you know what? I think I've got to share the whole screen, not just the window. So let me just stop and start again. Thank you for saying that. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we just explored the home ribbon. Now we're going to explore insert. So insert is where you would insert objects like charts and shapes. In some later Excel classes, we will also explore inserting pivot tables. So that's where you'll find these commands. In page layout, you can control how your spreadsheet looks, both on screen and print. You can use theme colors, change page margins and print areas. We click over to formulas. There's a lot of different options to explore and input formulas. Again, some later Excel classes will focus more on this topic, but we'll just do a little teaser for formulas in this class today. On our data ribbon, we can manage data in our spreadsheet and connect to other data. You'll also see some of the commands repeated, so you'll see some sort buttons and some filter buttons as well. This is true in Excel. There's usually a couple different ways you can do the same thing, so it's totally fine to land on the one that you like and feel most comfortable with, but just know there's more than one way to do things almost always. In the review ribbon, we've got options to add comments, to check spelling, protect your worksheet. View we'll use a little bit today when we practice freezing panes, and we'll look at the zoom options. There's also just some other views you can explore. And then the help button is just one of the ways you can look for support if you're having an issue in Excel. Finally, file is just where you open, close, save, etc. So I'll just click this little back button to get back to where I started. And now I'm going to click back to home, which is, again, probably the place that I use the most. So actually, we're going to head back over to view now that I'm reminding myself, and we're going to find some other ways to zoom in and around on our worksheet. So one great way to use zoom is first to see how big your data is. So we saw when we were pulling the scroll bar around that it goes beyond what I can see with this zoom level. So if I bring my cursor to the left-hand side with this little minus button and hover over it, you see a box pops up that says zoom out. If I click that a couple times, I can click out as far as I need until with this data set, I can see it all in one screen. So zooming is possible on this little button over here. I think for my purposes, I'll zoom it back to 100%. You can also explore it on the view ribbon, where you've got this option to zoom to selection. So if we wanted to look a little more closely at a small set of data, I could zoom to selection and it would bring me right up there. 100% is really helpful. That allows you to just kind of zoom back out to what is 100%. I'm going to say we need a little bit more than this for, I think, the purposes of sharing screen. And then you can also click on this magnifying glass to have a custom set. So you can select from these options or put in your own value. So just a couple different options for you to zoom around on your worksheet. Okay, now we're going to talk about making selections. You've been seeing me kind of navigate around a little bit. And if any of you have opened Excel, which it sounds like many of you have, when you click on cells, that's how you're able to select them. You can see the changing information in the formula bar. You can also use the keyboard, your arrow keys, to move around. And oftentimes when I'm doing Excel data entry, I find this is the easiest way to quickly kind of move to the cell I'm looking to move to. If you want to select more than one cell, you would left click on the cell and drag. You can select to the right and down, so you can select a whole lot of data or just a small set of data. If you like using your keyboard, or if for some reason you have a trackpad maybe that's hard to use, you can also use your keyboard. So if I were looking to do the same thing with my keyboard, I would select a cell, hold down Shift, and then use my arrow keys. And while I'm holding down Shift, you'll see that it's doing the same thing that I was doing with my mouse. So if that's more comfortable to you, you can certainly kind of start selecting things that way as well. So beyond just selecting sections of data or certain areas, you can also select entire columns and rows. That means that you either just click on the top of that column, so on the letters portion, you can select the entire column that goes all the way from the very top all the way to the very bottom, or you can select your rows here by clicking on the numbers to the left-hand side. If you want to select multiple at once, you just left click, hold, and drag with rows or columns. You can also do the same thing again if you really prefer using your keyboard. Hold down your Shift button and select more by using your arrow keys. You can do that with columns and rows. If you want to select rows or columns that aren't right next to each other, sometimes that might be because you want to highlight them maybe or change the color. You select your first row and then you hold down the Control key. So on my keyboard, that is a CTRL. And then holding that down, I can select more columns that aren't right next to each other. And I can do whatever I want. I could color them or whatever I have in mind. So in the the Word doc that we sent to you, we have a little cheat sheet for the keyboard shortcuts that can help you move around your workbook. I'll just tell you a couple more because they can be really helpful. If you click the Tab button, that's like you're selecting the arrow button. And that just moves you horizontally to the right, which can be really a helpful one in data entry. Now, let's say you want to go to the bottom right use cell. So that's your whole data set. You want to go to the very bottom. You can hold down the Control button and you can click End. On my computer, on my laptop, that's up towards the top. On your keyboard, it might be to the right, but try clicking Control and End. And you'll see it takes me all the way down to the bottom right of my workbook. So if I scroll down, there's no more data underneath, and there should be no more data to the right. I can also reverse that by clicking, holding down Control and Home, and it will take me all the way back to the top left-hand corner of my workbook. This isn't a huge help in this kind of small data set, but if you're working with a really large data set, knowing these simple keyboard commands can save you a lot of scrolling or dragging a scroll bar. You can also use Control and arrow keys to move to the farthest cell in the direction of that worksheet. So if I hold down Control and I push the right arrow, it will just take me to the places where it's filled. And then once it's no longer detecting any data, it goes all the way to the right-hand side of my data. I can also click down Control to the bottom by touching the bottom arrow. It'll take me all the way down to the millionth row, which is very far down. And like I said, in this case, not very helpful because I only have about 80 entries in my data set. But helpful if you're trying to see how far down it goes. So let's get back to where we started. We'll hold Control and Home to get right back up to A1, which is where my data starts. Okay, We're going to jump in now to doing some formatting of our worksheet, but I wanted to pause for just a moment and see if anyone has questions just about basically moving around their workbook or any other questions that may have come up. It looks like someone raised a hand. Is that Belin?
Yes, hi, thank you, Audrey. I was just wondering, I couldn't see what home button you were clicking because on my Google, there's no home, it just is a file. And I'm using Google Sheets. So I just copy and pasted the worksheet from Excel so I could actually follow along on Google, but I don't have a home button. So how do I, can you tell me what that shortcut was once you press Control N to get to the very bottom corner? And then how do you get back on top on Google? Do you by any chance know that?
I'm not sure. So if I'm not 100% sure on Google Sheets, a lot of times these commands will work. So did you try clicking Control and End?
Oh, again? No, I did not. When I click Control and End, it takes me to the bottom. Let me see if no, it does not reverse it. It keeps me there.
To reverse it, to get back, you would click Control and Home on your keyboard. Home,
where is that? Let's see.
So usually it's right next to the button that says End. On my laptop, it looks like it's to the left.
Oh yeah, there it is. Never mind. That's what you meant. Got it. I thought you meant home on the Google Sheet next to File. I don't have that home button. I was like, what a strange way to do it. But okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. No, it's true. And I think that there's, like I said, in Excel and also with Google Sheets, there's a number of different ways to do the same thing. So totally great to clarify. And good for you for trying in Google Sheets. I think you will be able to do most everything, but don't hesitate to reach out if something doesn't look the same and you can't figure it out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Don't be shy at any point. I'm happy to pause. Okay, well, now we'll start reshaping and reformatting our worksheet to make it a little easier to use. So right now, it's maybe not formatted in a way that makes it super easy to use. So first of all, we're going to try to adjust the worksheet to get rid of a lot of these number signs, these pound signs. So that's one big reason why we need to change the width of the rows. So you can see when I click on these, there actually is data in there. This just means that the column itself is too narrow to actually show the data to us. So there's a couple different ways to do this. The first one is to drag the column to change the width. So in this example, we'll hover over the column B. You can see I'm able to select it if when I hover over B, the little down arrow appears. Now I want to move my cursor to the right. You can see now it changes to arrows pointing left to right. And now if I left click and drag, all of my data magically appears. There's a couple of different ways to do this as well. So I just did the click and drag. The other way that I think is really helpful is to actually, so we have this column F where we have birth dates, none of which are showing. The other way to do it besides clicking and dragging is to move your cursor to the right-hand side and double click, and it will automatically resize to fit the widest cell. So this is great. It's sort of an automatic detection to make your data fit. Sometimes that data, the widest data might be the cells underneath, or sometimes it might be the header. So it just depends.
I'm sorry, can you repeat how you do it with the double click?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have a cell that you're trying to, or sorry, a column that you're trying to resize, you would, just like you were getting ready to kind of pull it over and manually drag it, instead of doing that, you'll have your little left and right arrows appear. And then with that hovering in that same spot, double click, and it will automatically resize.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's yet another way to resize your columns, which I'll just show you in case it's ever helpful, but I tend to use either the drag or the double click method. So let's say I wanted to size this in a particular way, so I could actually change the column width. What I did here was I right clicked on the top. I'm going to pull my cursor down to this command that says column width. It will show me the numbers. It's saying apparently it's 11.11 wide. I'm not sure if that's pixels or exactly what that is, but if I know I want it to be wider, maybe I'd experiment and say, well, let's try 15. and it widens out. So this is all helpful to do on a column by column basis, but sometimes you want to do that on more than one at a time. So there's a couple ways to do it that are just helpful to know. So let's say I'm trying to resize a couple of these at once, and we'll just select a couple of these. So if I have more than one column selected and I pull my cursor to the side of one, you can see I've got those left and right arrows again. And now if I resize them, it's going to resize all of them to look exactly the same. Sometimes that's really helpful and that's what you want. It kind of helps your spreadsheet look similar with exactly the same widths for the columns. However, you can also do this same trick and double click. Excel is pretty smart actually, and when you double click a bunch of columns at once, it actually resizes them to fit each column. So you can see some of them are very narrow. In my gender column, I must have nothing more wide than female, but in this race column, I've got a very wide data point in this cell, more than one race. And so it resizes the column to fit the widest piece of data. So it's helpful to know when you're kind of playing around. I'll give everyone just a minute to maybe resize the columns that are in your data sheet to be easy to see. So again, I'm just looking for places to make sure I'm not seeing any of those number signs. I can see a lot of things. This is going to come up a little bit later, but I actually think it's so helpful to think about right now. You can see I've got these columns right here that have dollar amounts in them. So I don't really need this data to be as wide as it would be made when I double click. So this is where a special tool called wrap text comes in real handy. So I'm going to go ahead and select the entire first row and go back to my home ribbon. And when I move my cursor over to about the middle of that ribbon, you can see a button that says wrap text. If you don't see the words wrap text, you might just see these little letters here. And in Google Sheets, it may not be on the home ribbon, but should be a wrap text option that looks somewhat similar. And when you select that, it actually changes a lot of the first row, so it doesn't disappear off the edge of the column. So this, I still need to adjust this, but this allows me to adjust it, and it will still fit and be something I can read the entire header in each section. So I really like this one. It helps make things really clear, especially when you're kind of trying to format your data in your spreadsheet so you can see and make sense of it. So try using that wrap text function as you're resizing your columns to make it really easy to read. What happened here for me is that for the biggest header, it made the row really wide. So once I've fixed that, I can kind of do the same thing that I did with the columns and resize my row back up a little bit. That's looking better. Did anyone have any issues with that, or are you able to resize?
I was able to resize, but I'm not going to lie, I don't really see a significant difference in my. Did I just miss the wrapping? I don't know. I clicked on the very top. What is that corner called? Between the 1 and the A at the very top left, where you click it and it highlights everything. Yeah. What is that? Okay, sorry.
I don't know what that's called, but that is a great way to select all of your data.
Right. And then I hovered, created the arrow, and then I double clicked and it resized everything. But then when I did the wrapping, I didn't really see a significant change. So I wasn't sure what change it made, but I don't know. I did great. Yeah, I don't know.
So what you did when you double clicked is you resized your columns to fit the widest possible data piece in any of those cells. So probably if you'd already double clicked, that means that sort of it's already done that for you. So you wouldn't need to wrap any text until you try to resize them down a little bit. So if you take, I'm guessing like column P for me was pretty long. So if I double click that, well, now that I've wrapped it, it actually is keeping it more narrow. But if you had double clicked this before, we had wrapped the text, it would send it all the way out to this wide. And then if I show you the opposite, if I unwrap the text, then if I narrow it down, it just kind of disappears off the edge. So I can't read
Oh,
it.
I see that now, and I see it very clearly now that you said that. And yeah, I do see the entire wording. Perfect. Wow, this is actually something that's very necessary for me to learn. So I'm glad that that was clarified. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't hesitate. I feel like some of these little things, there's like it seems simple, but it's not stuff that you just learn on the job, and it can really make using Excel a lot easier. So it's exactly why we're having this class. So yeah, play with that a little bit and kind of resize your columns in a way that makes it easiest for you to see the data. So maybe that, like for me, I didn't want mine to be this wide because that's pretty wide, and I want to be able to see more data at once. So that's where wrapping this text for the header really helps me and makes it a little easier to see. I'm going to do the same thing as I resize some of these other ones. Okay, great. So you can keep kind of tweaking that and kind of make it in the way that's easiest for you to see. We're going to practice now inserting new columns and rows. So the reason you might want to do this is you might want to see certain data next to each other that might not appear that way in your data set. Or maybe you need to add new data. There's a couple different reasons why you might need to kind of manipulate your data set. So if we want to pretend that we're going to put some new data in, we need to select the column that's to the right of where we want the new data to go. So let's say we want to put a new column after case ID, for example. I'm going to go ahead and select column B. Column B is, I want my new column to be between A and B. So I select the column to the right of that, which is column B. There's a couple ways to do this. So the first is through the home ribbon. So if you're not already selecting the home ribbon, just click on that. You should see these different commands down here. Then you can move your cursor over. For me, it's about almost over to the right-hand side. And I see this option to insert. When I click it, it's either saying that I can insert cells or insert sheet columns. In this case, I want to insert sheet columns. It's like a tongue twister. And when I click that, it adds a new column between A and B. Now this new column is called B. Another way to do that without using the home ribbon, I just did an undo. I did Control Z, which undoes my last action. You can also push this button if you ever want to undo anything or redo anything. These are great, because I know we all make mistakes, so it's nice to be able to go back. We can also add a new column by right-clicking on this B here and just coming down to insert. So that achieves the same thing. If you're more comfortable using the icons, that's great. They're right up here in that home button or home ribbon. If right-clicking in the spreadsheet itself is easier, that's great too. Again, the same thing occurs. So in the same way, you can delete. So you see this nice delete button up here. We can go ahead and delete the column that we just created. If I click back, I can also delete it by right-clicking on the column up here and deleting it. So a couple different ways, whatever you prefer. So let's say I want to add a couple of new columns. I might add them right after this individual ID. We'll get to doing a little bit of data entry in a moment, which is why I'm showing you this. So we'll go ahead and insert two columns, however you feel most comfortable. I usually do a right click and an insert, but since I'm showing both methods, I'll also insert the second column using the icon in the home ribbon. So now for the purposes of the practice we'll do in a moment, I'm going to call one county and one column state. So you can go ahead and do the same thing if you're able to insert those two wherever you like on the spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be after individual ID. Great. Okay, now I'm also going to show you how we might move a column around of existing data. So let's say I've got this case ID and I've got my individual ID, and I realize after looking at my data or working with it for a while that actually I want these to be right next to each other. Just be easier for me and the type of work I need to do. So there's a couple ways to do that. We can do what we just did and add a column in between case ID and family enrollment. So again, can insert, create that new column. Then I'll come over to individual ID, select that whole column. I want to move the whole thing. And then I can right click, cut. You can see anytime you cut or copy, you should see the little kind of ants marching line, the green line around the data you selected. That's how you know it's been like copied or cut. Then I'll select where I want the data to go, which in this case is in my new column that I've created. You can either paste using the Control V, which is just your keyboard shortcut, or you can paste using this icon. So when I click that, I click the icon and it moves it right over. There's also, if you start feeling more comfortable, you can remove one step. I'll go back to where we started.
Yeah, can you repeat that last part, Audrey?
Yeah, absolutely. The moving, the creating a column and moving. Okay. Yeah, so let's do that version first, and then I'll show you a slightly shorter way to do that. So between column A and column B is where I want to put my new column, or where I want to move this column D, the individual ID. So we'll make a new column in between A and C now. This is now my new column B. I'll select column E by clicking on the E, and that will, you can see where it's all highlighted. Then I'll right click and cut, and I'll look for those marching ants, those green marching ants. And then I'll move my cursor over and select column B as the place where I want to paste it. I'll click that paste icon and the home ribbon and paste. Excel had to think about that for a minute. I'm not sure why. If I was going to keep moving forward with this, I would go ahead and just delete this column because I don't need it anymore. And then I've moved my whole column over into a way that is just better for me to see. You can do that with one fewer steps once you get more comfortable. I think this is a really great way to do it if you just want to make sure that you're not losing any data. But you can get to the point where, so I just did undo, undo, undo until I got back to where we started. So you can also click those buttons. I did Control Z, but these buttons also work great. The other way to do it is to highlight the entire column, column D. You do the same thing. You select cut, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight the column that's to the right of where I want this new data to go. So I know I want column D to become the new column B. So I'll highlight the current column B. That's to the right of where I want this new one. Right click, and instead of paste, if I did paste, I would copy over this data, and I don't want that to happen. I just want to insert. So insert for Excel means that it's going to move everything over and allow me to essentially move this new column. So this one's a little more elegant. I don't have to insert columns. I don't have to delete columns. It's just a cut and an insert, and it's just moved it right over and deleted that other column. So if you feel more comfortable inserting columns, that is totally fine. And I did that. I do that still sometimes when I just want to make sure I'm not pasting over something, but this is another way. All right. Any questions on that? Okay, great. So I think we can still make this spreadsheet look a little easier to use. So, and this is a lot of this is still kind of our default settings. We've adjusted the column width and kind of selected that wrap text to help us see our headers a little better, but we'll play with a little more formatting to make this easier to see. So we'll take another quick tour of this home ribbon. So you can see here, we can change the font size. I've actually started using these little arrow font size up and font size down. If you just want to practice using those, it's just a super quick way. You don't even have to mess with numbers. You just click up, click down to change sizes. You can change bold, italic, underline. You can change the color, the text alignment, and the position of the text. So usually I think it's very helpful to make your headers look different from the rest of your data worksheet. So we'll go ahead and left click on the leftmost column, so that's A1, and drag all the way over to where it stops, which for me right now is V1. So now I've selected all of my headers. The first thing I think that's really helpful when I'm looking at data is to somehow visually separate it from the rest. So I like to add a bottom border along the bottom of the header row. So to add borders, you come over to this little grid mark type icon. And when you click the down arrow, you can see all kinds of different options. So, you know, if you've played with this before, you know, you can just add grids around every single cell. But in this case, I want to only do the bottom border. So I'm going to click on that. And now when I deselect everything, I can see that nice line between row 1 and row 2. Now, let's also modify this text to make it a little easier to read. I'll go ahead and select that again. And I'm going to make this all bold. So again, that's just another visual cue that it's different from the rest of my data. I also think it'd be helpful if this was in the middle of each cell. So I've centered it in the middle. Some people also like to use this positioning. If we've got kind of a wide row, you can kind of put things in the middle of that row so it stands out and is also a little bit different from the rest of your data. And then finally, I think it's really great to change the color. So maybe I'll choose this nice mellow yellow color up here that sort of shows me that things are looking different. And you know, it's also looking to me like they kind of run into each other. So the last thing I'll do is I changed my mind that I want actually the cells to all have borders on the header. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all borders. And then you can see where one cell column starts and one stops. So if you want to do things differently, please do. This is a great time to just play with different formats and, you know, colors that please your eye. But it's just a quick example of how we can make this look a little easier to navigate. Okay, the other thing that I find really helpful, especially when you've got a big data set, is to freeze your cells depending on how you want to see it. So first, we're going to move over to the View ribbon. So that's up here on the top. We'll click View. And then I see over here my Freeze Panes option. If I click on this, one of the easiest things to do is I can freeze either the top row or my first column. In this case, we've mostly been playing with our headers. So I'm going to click on that. And then when I start scrolling down using my scroll bar, you can see that that doesn't disappear. So I can always see, even if I'm at the very bottom of my data set, I don't have to scroll back up to see, oh yeah, what was column M? So this is great. It helps me be able to see what my header is. You can take that actually a step farther if you like, or if you have a reason to. So I'll go ahead and unfreeze my panes. So going back, or the other thing I can do, oops, sorry, my home button, I can go back. Oh, actually back does not change formatting. I'm forgetting that. Back changes any changes you make, but views are not changed by the back button. So if I wanted to unchange that, I would have to go back to freeze panes and click unfreeze panes. And then you can see it disappears when I scroll. Now, if I also wanted to freeze not only just the top row, but if I always want to be able to see case ID and individual ID, I can do like a custom freeze. So I'm going to select the cell, the first cell that I don't want to freeze. So that means I'm going to select C2. For a custom freeze, anything that's to the left of that cell will be frozen, and anything that is above that cell will be frozen. So once I select that, go ahead and select your C2 and go back up to your View ribbon and the Freeze Panes icon. Instead of selecting Freeze Top Row, I'm going to choose the top option, which is Freeze Panes. So this will allow me to kind of do a custom freeze. You see when I do that, I see this new line appear. And that means when I scroll down, I still have the headers frozen. But now when I scroll right, I can also see that my columns A and B have frozen. So this is great. A lot of times it might not be a case ID, but maybe it's a client name and you want to be able to see who it is while you're exploring their data. This can be very helpful if you have a big data set. I'll pause for just a moment if you're all practicing that or if there are any questions.
So I do have a question. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm taking up all the time, space. In case anyone else needs to talk, please interrupt. But so on my Google sheet, it looks very different. It's view and then freeze, and then it's separated by options of rows or columns. But my question is, you were able to scroll down, and do you have your top row frozen? Is that how you were able to scroll down? And because I thought you unfroze that to show us how to freeze the columns. So right now I'm able to scroll left and right, and everything up to C is frozen, and then everything else is mobile. I'm trying to use the right technical terms. I guess just wanted to see how you did that.
Yeah,
I was a little
I'm looking at Google Sheets right now, and it looks like the options are a little bit different. So it's showing you that you can freeze up to.
I froze up to row C because
row
that's where I had it clicked.
Got it. Okay. And then let's see, up to column C, and then it looks like you can also add. So it looks like you can add both of those. You just have to do it in using 2 clicks. You have
exactly.
To okay. So you were able to do that.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I got it. Just for you talking. I got it. Thank you for holding my hands. Thank you. That actually worked.
No worries.
Please feel free to bring up questions, because if you're having that question, it's very likely that somebody else is experiencing the same issue. So
thank you.
Yes. And this is really, I mean, it honestly can be such a huge help. So yeah, the more questions, the better for some of these items that do look a little bit different on Google Sheets. So that's great that you're exploring it and figuring it out in real time. I'm impressed. Okay, we're actually about halfway through, and I want to be conscious of time. So it's been about 50 minutes of some nonstop Excel excitement. So we're going to take just a 5-minute break until, let's see, 1:56 to give everyone a moment to stretch, take a bio break, or grab some water. And we'll be right back here at 1:56. And we'll get started. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and hope that I'm able to do this where you can see my mouse. So let's see if I can do that. Okay, are you able to see the highlights? Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to practice some simple data entry that can hopefully be helpful for some of you. Maybe you don't do a whole lot of data entry, but I think at some level we all have to enter data into Excel at some point. So this is just kind of a short little practice on how to do that. So maybe you remember we made these county and state columns. If you didn't make that when we made the time, you can either scroll to the right to practice, or you can insert them now. So if you have your county column, we'll go ahead and select the first cell under that, so E2. And for the purposes of just imagining, I will say this is a fake data set, so this is not real people. This is just kind of made up data. But we'll assume maybe that we serve only clients in King County. So we just need to have King County all the way down this column. So to do that, maybe I'd start by just typing in King. As you remember, we can move to the next column to the right by pressing Tab or pressing the side arrow button, the right arrow button. So you can either push Tab or the right arrow button to move over to the state. We'll go ahead and type Washington in that. And now instead of pushing Tab, I don't want to go over to the relationship column. I want to push Enter. So Excel will go ahead and pull down my my cell to the next column. I actually want to be on King here. If I go ahead and type in King, I can tab over, click Washington. If I use Tab when I press Enter, it will pull me over back to the county column. So I could keep going like this for a while, but obviously there's a quicker way to just fill in everything. So you'll notice as I type King again that it's recognizing the same word. So it's saying, hey, you've already filled this in. Do you want me to fill this in? So I've only typed K, but now if I press Tab, it will just keep King filled in, which is great. It will also notice the same thing for Washington. So, okay, that's a little bit more helpful, but if I just want to go ahead and, pull this all the way down, there's a couple ways to do that. I can either drag it down. So if I select this cell and then move my cursor to the bottom right of that cell, you see my icon changes from like a white cross to a black cross. And it's also showing you this little square in the bottom right-hand corner of that cell. So there's a couple different ways to do it. I can either just left click and drag all the way down to the bottom. When I let go, it should just fill in King all the way down to the bottom. So that's great. The other neat way is I can just double click and it will do the same thing. Now it won't fill it all the way down to the very bottom of the spreadsheet. We don't need that all the way down to the millionth row, but Excel is pretty smart and it knows when I double click this, I only want this to go down to the end of my data set. So it stops once it detects no more data along there. So that's great. It makes, especially if you have a situation where data entry, you just need to kind of enter the same thing. This is a super quick way. The only other way that I would share that might be helpful is you can just select one cell, copy, either by coming over here and clicking this icon that says copy. So you can either click that, or it gives you, when I hover over this, the keyboard shortcut that's Control-C. So I can either click the icon or I can just click Control-C, and then I can highlight all the other cells where I want that Washington to go. And I can click Paste or Control-V, and it will fill it in. So you can either drag, double click, or copy and paste.
Can
Sorry.
you? Oh, yes.
Oops. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you could, Audrey, if you could repeat the double click.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's click my back button. So to double click, if I just know I want this, again, this is applies if I just want to do the same thing all the way down the row. I just select one cell and I move my cursor to the bottom right until it changes to a black cross. So you see, it normally is this white cross. When it becomes the black cross, that's when I know I can double click and it will fill it all the way down to the bottom of where it detects data.
Okay, mine is only filling in the next row below it. Is there something I'm not doing?
Let's see. And yeah, Jen, is that something you're able to test on in Google Sheets?
Yeah, there might be a difference with Google Sheet. I'll write it in the chat there.
Yeah, it's a lot of the things are the same, but sometimes there are some functionalities that are slightly different. So this, I'm not sure. I can't remember. This might be one of them.
Okay, so I'm also having that same problem. I don't have Google Sheet. I'm using the Excel. So once from the white to black, right?
Yeah.
And then double click as when it turns into black.
Yeah, so when it turns into this black cross is usually when you want to double click.
Okay, because I tried it and it's not working out. Oh, never mind. Thank you. I got it.
It worked?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a little playing with. I'm glad we're practicing. I'm actually going to take us over to our patterns tab right now to do a little bit more practice. So we'll have some chance to work on this a little bit more. I'm also going to show you some patterns that Excel recognizes that can make things easy for you. I believe the same is true in Google Sheets, but Bilan or others who are using Google Sheets, if it's not working, just chat us or unmute and mention it, and we'll look into it. Okay, so you see here that I've moved my cursor and I've selected the Patterns tab. And I have a couple of examples in here for us. So in my first column, in column A, I've got a full date going on. So I'm imagining that maybe I need to enter some sort of data every single day of the month. So I started with August 1st of 2021. I could keep going this way and typing 2021, but this could get old if I have to type it all the time. So a good way, Excel will recognize that you're trying to type some patterns, but you need to select a couple of cells to tell it what pattern you're asking it to notice. So in this case, I'm asking it to notice, look, Excel, I'm doing August 1st, 2nd, 3rd, you do the rest. So I can, again, I'm going to move my cursor to the bottom right-hand side and wait for that little icon to change to that black cross. And I'm going to left click and drag down for a little while. And Excel will just know to fill in each subsequent day. So I don't have to go through and enter in every single date, which is very tedious. Excel is also pretty smart. It knows there's only 31 days in August. So if I went further, it'll switch over to September. So this is just one of the many patterns that it will recognize. But I will note that in order for it to recognize the pattern, you usually have to indicate that you're asking it to look at a couple different cells so it can continue that pattern. I'll show you an example of what I mean. So in this column, I have date, or this could just be a number, but I've got 1, 2. If I only have 2 highlighted and I do that same trick, if I move my cursor to the right and drag down, it's only going to fill in 2. It's like Excel's noticing that I'm only asking it to fill in 1 number. However, if I select left click on the 1 and drag down to the 2, now it's got 2 cells highlighted. If I pull over again to that box and wait for that black cross to appear and then drag down, it will do sort of what I'm asking it to do with the Excel, which is recognize that pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. It's not just numbers. Excel will also recognize days. So, in this example, I can highlight Monday, Tuesday. I'm going to go ahead and double click now because I've got data to the left of it. And we're going to see that it goes all the way to Sunday and then starts over again on Monday and completes the pattern. This one will go all the way down to where it detects the bottommost pattern, which is on the 7th of September. Let's say I want to keep that going here. So see, if I do this, it's only going to fill in my 31. And I'm actually only going to do August because that's maybe what I'm doing for this report. So I'll delete the rest of this data. But then we've got some really great start to my data without having to type it all out. You don't just have to go down rows, you can also go across columns too. So in this example, I've got January and February. If I wanted to get all the months in the year, you just pull over from the February kind of side little square box on the bottom right, and I can populate all the way over to December. If I want to keep going, it will start over in January. So those are just a couple little patterns to hopefully make some data entry easier for you. Did anyone have questions on those or any issues with making those patterns work? Okay. Great. All right, well, let's go back over to our demographics tab. We'll do a little bit more data manipulation and cleaning. So I'm going to show you some basics. Jen mentioned she loves sorting and filtering, so we're going to do a little bit of just an intro to those tools right now because they can be incredibly helpful. Okay, so sorting helps you put your data in a certain order by date, number, alphabetized, or more. When you filter, it actually helps you isolate data based on certain criteria you choose. So let's start with doing a little bit of practice. Let's start with some sorting. So I'm going to select anywhere in my worksheet. And then I'm going to go over to my Home tab and move my cursor all the way over to the right where I've got Sort and Filter. I'll click that. And I can do a couple of different things. I can do a custom sort. We're not going to get into that detail. We can do sort oldest to newest, sort newest to oldest. I should have noted we should probably select which column we're on. So let's say we want to start by service start. We want to see and order our data based on when people started services with our fictional program. So I'll select any cell in that column, come over to the sort and filter button, and maybe I want to do oldest to newest. So I'll go ahead and click on sort. And now I can see that my data is reordered based on when the service started. All the way, so it looks like the earliest one was in March of 2018, all the way to October of 2019. So that's a super simple way to do a quick sort based on a certain column. Okay, I can also do filtering, which is I actually kind of like to use filtering first because it allows you to sort within that. So let's go ahead back over to that sort and filter button and add filters. So when I click on filters, you can see that I've now got these little arrows, kind of like down caret arrows that have appeared on every column header. So this is my filter button. Let's scroll over to the individual language. This is, for me, this is column N. It might be something different for you. If you click on that button, you can see all the different options that appear. So it looks like in this whole data set, I've got people who speak English, Japanese, and Spanish. So this is really great. This is also, along with allowing me to filter, it also is a quick way for me to see all the choices I have in the data. I will call out that this is only useful for some columns. So if I go over here to my case ID, it's not really that helpful. I can see all the case IDs, but that's not really how I want to be looking at my data. It's much more helpful for categories, something like language. So we'll go back over and click that down caret button, and I can see all of the different languages that are in my data set. Let's say I only want to look at Spanish speakers now. If I only want to look at Spanish speakers, I'm going to click this checkbox that says select all, and then go down and only click the Spanish one. Now I'm going to select OK, and I can see that I've got only Spanish speakers in my column, and I'm able to kind of see these only. So it looks like, I don't know, maybe about 15 people. You can see too that I've changed the way my filter icon looks up here. It's got kind of a highlighted, looks like a filter. And then on the left-hand side, all my numbers, my row numbers, aren't in order anymore. And this is another way to, a visual cue that I've got a filter on. So you don't want to forget that you've got a filter on, because if you go away, come back to this worksheet and start thinking that this is all of your people, you just aren't looking at the full picture. So always just check. This is a quick way to look on the left-hand side if you've got a filter on, if these numbers aren't in order, and then you can also look at any of the filter icons as well. So we can use filters to just look at our data and see, isolate it based on certain criteria, but we can also use it to do some really simple data cleaning. I'm going to take this filter off right now by clicking it again. You can either clear the filter like this, or you could just reselect everything. Again, there's a couple ways you can clear the filter, or you can just reselect them in these checkboxes. Okay, so now you can see on the left-hand side, I've got my numbers in chronological order again. It looks like my filters are off. So let's go over to that birth date column. This is column H for me. I'm going to click on this down caret, and I'm going to sort oldest to newest. So you know how I can do my sorting by clicking on this button up here, but it's just so great to have those filter icons on, and you can just do it right in your worksheet. So that's why I usually prefer to do it that way. So I'm going to take a quick look, and right away I see that I probably have an issue with a couple of entries in my data. It looks like maybe it's fine starting with this person and going later, but these first 4 people, unless they're really 122, I don't think that date is probably correct. They're also all the same, which is another indication to me that I probably need to look at that data. So one way to do this would be to highlight these. I'm going to tell myself I want to come look at them later. So I'm going to come back up to my ribbon, select the paint bucket icon, and then maybe choose this bright yellow. So I'm telling myself I need to look at these and fix them. So I just used my sorting to help me do a quick check and realized I have a couple of issues there. I can also, let's go over to our gender column and click the filter icon again. I'm not expecting to see very many options, but here I see what looks like probably a spelling error. So I've got male and female and then misspelled female. I'm going to uncheck all of these and check this incorrect one. When I click OK, I've got these 4 rows that have this spelled incorrectly. So I can do this data cleaning right here. I can just retype in the correct spelling. And as I've shown you, instead of having to retype that a bunch of different times, I'll just hover over until I get to that bottom right-hand corner where I see that black cross. I'll just drag and pull and fix it. Now, when I click on my filter, I see only 2 options. So it's only detecting those 2. I fixed it. This is great. I'll select all and click OK. And now I only have 2 choices in this option. Okay, I'm also going to show you a brief teaser on conditional formatting that is designed to help us tell if there's duplicate entries in here. So maybe you've come across this before where somebody has entered the same person twice. Probably the way we would tell if that's the case is by looking at individual ID. So I'm going to go up to my home ribbon. Sorry, I'm going to select column B first. So I know that I want to detect duplicates in this column. I'm going to go up to my home ribbon. I'm going to move my cursor over to conditional formatting. Left click on that. And what I'm doing, conditional formatting is basically, it allows me to make cells look different according to certain rules. So I'm only going to show you the example of coloring the cells based on whether they're duplicates, but there's so many things you can do with conditional formatting. You can highlight if they're above a certain number, or if they have a certain name within them, a lot of different things. We're just going to give you this teaser so you get a sense for some of the things you can do with this tool. And Jen will go into that more in future trainings. So something to look forward to. So you'll click on conditional formatting, move your cursor down to highlight cell rules. And I see some more options here. I see right down here at the bottom, duplicate values. So I'm going to hover over that and click on it. Then I've got a choice of what I want these to show up as. You can see it looks like I already have some duplicate values over here. If you want that to look different, maybe you want it to be green, you can play with that. That's just how you want it to look. That's the formatting it's applying when it finds a duplicate. I'll leave it as red since it's something I'm trying to fix, and click OK. So now anytime there's a duplicate detected, and this is true for ongoing, if this is a formatting rule that's set, if I enter a new duplicate, it will also become highlighted. So it's kind of a cool thing about conditional formatting. In this case, though, I'm just trying to remove duplicates. I don't want these duplicates in my data set. So I'm going to look, and I think usually what happens when you notice something like that is you want to make sure it really is a duplicate. So I've got the same individual ID. I'm looking here across, and it seems like for these 2 columns, they really are a true duplicate. It looks like everything I'm seeing is the same. Usually, if you have a really big data set, it's good to do a sanity check for, a couple of these. Looks like I've got the same issue here. It looks like the data is exactly the same. And maybe once I've checked 2, I feel pretty sure that's true. It's finding my true duplicates. Here's my other one right here. So if I want to remove them, you have 2 choices. You could either just delete one. So if I've decided, yes, it's really a true duplicate, I don't want this anymore, we can delete it one by one. So you can use this delete option that we talked about earlier, where you select one of the duplicate columns. You can come over, maybe you use your delete button on your home ribbon, you delete this row. And it disappears, and you can see now I don't have this highlighted any longer because we've deleted the duplicate. The other option is to go over to your data column. And we're going to go ahead and come up to this little icon here that says remove duplicates. It selects automatically the whole worksheet. I'm going to unselect everything. I'm going to make sure this box is checked. It says my data has headers, which means that it's not going to delete anything in the top row. And then again, I'm only deleting duplicates for individual IDs. So this is a second way to do it, a little more complicated, but can be very helpful if you have a very big data set, you have a lot of duplicates, you don't want to do them like one by one or by hand. So we'll go ahead and make sure that's selected. We have only individual ID selected, and we'll click OK. And Excel tells me they did find 2 duplicate values and they were removed. So now I'll do just one more check. And it looks like I no longer have any duplicates because I'm not seeing them highlighted there in red. So I'll pause for just a moment and see if anyone has questions or if that made sense.
Could you just go through that one more time, that last step?
Yeah,
Thanks.
let's see. Let me go ahead and do back a couple of times. Great. Did you mean the remove duplicates button?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so, as I said before, one quick way to do it, if you only have a couple, like in this case, I probably would just go through and delete them by hand. But if you're dealing with a pretty big data set and you want to do them all at once, you've checked and you feel pretty confident that they're true duplicates, then you might want to use that remove duplicates button. So I'll do that again. So we can see here, I press the back button to, go back a couple of steps. I still have 3 sets of duplicates. If I know I want to delete all the duplicates of individual IDs, I'll go ahead over to my data ribbon. And on my Excel, it looks like this like X button here. So I'll click that. And you'll see that it automatically selects all of my data. I'm going to make sure that this checkbox is selected where it says my data has headers. I'm going to unselect everything because I really only know that I want to delete duplicates of the individual ID. So if I were to delete duplicates of others, there's a lot of duplicates in other areas and we don't want to delete those. So I'll select only individual ID and then I'll click OK. And then in that case, it's telling me 3 duplicate values were found and removed. That's because I didn't delete that first one by hand. And so that's just telling me that that's how many they removed. So I know, and then I can click OK and kind of do my visual spot check and see if there's anything left. And I don't see anything left on this individual ID.
Audrey, could you go back and show the conditional formatting? How you would set that up as well?
Yes, I can. Let's see. I'm going to go back a couple of steps here. Oh yeah, okay, so we've got these. So we'll go forward a step. Okay, so let's do conditional formatting again. And again, more to come on conditional formatting. This is just kind of giving you a taste because there's lots and lots of ways you can do conditional formatting. Okay. Great, so I'm going to select column B because as we've talked about, I know that my data is going to be, the duplicates I really want to see are in that individual ID column. So to do that, I'm going to go to my home ribbon to highlight those duplicates. I'll come over to conditional formatting, this icon right here, and I'm going to go down to highlight cell rules. Another menu pops up and you can see some of the examples. We've got greater than, less than, between, equal to, but we want duplicate values. I'll go ahead and click on that. When I get that option, it's showing me duplicate because I clicked duplicate. Looks like I could highlight the opposite, which would be unique, but I want to only look at duplicates. And then, select the way you want to look at it. Maybe we'll choose green this time, and then you click OK. Then you can see here kind of which ones are the duplicate values. I think there should be 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Great questions. If you're enjoying conditional formatting, you certainly can play with it a little bit. You can play with some of the rules. If you typically need to look for kids older than 5, this is a great thing to look for. You can also sort and filter. It just kind of depends on what you're trying to do with your data. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead. We'll do this duplicates one more time since I want to get these out of here. So again, we'll come over to my data ribbon, move over to remove duplicates, make sure that's selected, unselect all of these, do individual ID, and click OK. And those 3 duplicate values are removed. So we'll click OK. Now I've got that. Still got my birth dates I need to look into, but I'm going to have to ask my home visitors about that. So it's not something I can change right now. Okay. And now I think we will move into a little bit of a teaser on formulas. So again, we'll get more into formulas in other workshops, but this is just intended to be kind of a quick intro to kind of get you thinking and practicing using them a little bit. So we're going to do a couple of things here. First of all, we're going to scroll to the right of our worksheet where I start seeing blank cells. I'm going to start writing in a couple of different categories. So the first thing I want to do is have a total client count. So I'm going to enter that. We're going to use a formula that will count all of my clients in this database. I'm also going to do total family members. I also want to calculate an average, so an average visit completion. And then a max and a min. We'll do one for each: max family size and min family size. So I'll go ahead and resize this column a little bit. Maybe I'll double click to fit the widest one. And we'll look at how first we would do a client count. First of all, before we even do a formula, I want to show you a nifty kind of built-in feature of Excel. So let's say I want to get a count of my clients, and I know these are unique now because we just removed the duplicates. I can just click and hold and drag down all the way to the bottom. And if I look here, it's kind of small. I'm not sure how to make that bigger, but you can see there's some different numbers down here. The one I'm looking for is this count, and it's telling me that I've counted 84 cells with data in them. So this is a super quick way to get a count of the number of people in my data set. It's also telling me things that are not helpful for this example, like sum or averages. I might be more interested if I come over to this column right here that has a total family size. And if I just drag down this column here, I can look down here and say, oh, look, the average is 4. They've counted 84, and the sum is 315. So there's 315 family members total of all of my clients. So a couple of just built-in things that are really cool. You don't actually need to type a formula to look at some of these in a quick way. However, that changes the moment you click away, all that data disappears. So the cool thing about formulas is you can type them into your worksheet and they just stay there based on the data that you have. So if I just want to do that count and have my formula count down my data set, I'm going to start out by typing an equal sign. So this equal sign indicates and tells Excel that I'm about to give it a formula. Again, we'll go more into formulas in another training. So this is just a quick intro. Like we'll tell you a lot more about how to construct them, how to find them, explore them. But in this case, I know I'm just going to do a quick count. So I'm going to do equals and start typing the word count. You'll see that this formula box pops up and tells me all the different kinds of formulas I can use. I know I'm just doing a simple count, so I'm going to start typing count. You can also double click when you see the count. When you double click, it only just formats it and gives you that little parentheses, which can be helpful. So I'm only trying to count clients. I don't totally know my count, or I know it should be 84 based on looking at it, but I'm going to drag down my full list of individual IDs that I know are unique all the way down to the bottom. And you can see in my formula bar here, I've got equals count B2. This colon means through B85. And just by clicking and dragging, I was able to have it display those numbers, which is great. I can just put the close parentheses. So I'm telling Excel, please count the number of cells that have data in them from B2 to B85. And when I click enter and scroll back up here, it's going to have this number of 84. So that was the same number that we saw when we just looked on the bottom and did our quick drag and wanted to see kind of what we could see. Same number there, but now it's permanent and it doesn't go away. So that's helpful. Any questions there? Were you able to do that on your worksheet as well? Cool.
I think I might have missed a step because nothing happened. It's showing the formula. But if you could just kindly do that over, please.
Sure, no problem.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so we'll delete that. If it's just showing the formula, it's possible you need to move off of the cell or press enter, and then that will cause the formula to like go. But if that's not solving it for you, then you would again type the equal sign. I'm typing in count. I can just type it out myself and put the parentheses, or I can double click on that option that popped up there. In this case, I know, so you want to be careful where you choose to count. I know that I have a data entry for every single cell in my individual ID, but you can see some cells don't have data, like this married or not married. So I wouldn't want to count that column because that would make it look like there's fewer people. So I choose individual ID by left clicking on B2 and then dragging down all the way to the bottom. And Excel is pretty smart. Usually if I click enter, it will kind of know that it wants that I want to put that end parentheses on. You can also add it here. Now, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Couldn't you just click the B to highlight all of them, or do you have to start from the first number? Does that make sense? Like highlighting the whole columm? Or do you have to?
The only issue with that is if you clicked all of B, it would also count this first header.
Oh,
so you would be counting, here we'll change it to B1. Now you'll see, well, actually, interesting. B1 to B85. Oh, I'm sorry, it's counting because it's numbers. That is right. So yeah, it wouldn't count. In this case, this would work. But yeah, you just want to be careful. I usually just select the data I'm trying to count, just to make sure we don't run into a situation where it's not counting, or it's counting like a header or something like that. But I believe since this is numbers versus text, that's why it's not counting that.
okay, thanks.
Okay, we're also going to do the same thing. We're going to sum. So as you saw, the difference between count and sum, in this case, when we did our drag, the count is like how many of these cells have data in them, 84. But when it sums it up, it's like summing all these large numbers, which in some cases are like 200,000, but that's not what we would need. So sum wouldn't make any sense for this data, but it would when we're looking over here at this total family size. So again, you can just select the total family size and you can see, it looks like my sum is 315. If I want to do that same thing to the right, I would just type the equal symbol, type in sum, or I can double click it right here. And then I can drag down my total family size, the bottom here. And I'll get the same number, 315. I'm also going to show you a way to do a formula in your data set. So here we're getting kind of like summary data, but maybe we want to do a calculation in the data set itself. So let's go ahead, and I'm sorry, I think I did not update this in your Word documents. We can follow up. I sort of changed it slightly in between the time we emailed it out and today. So just follow along and we can send you the updated version after this class. So to add a calculation or a formula directly to your data set, we're going to go to column W and highlight the header. I'm going to call this visit completion percent. I'm going to make that a little wider. And just to give us a little space between these calculations, I'm going to insert one more column there so we have a little space between the two. I also want to show you kind of a neat trick that I use a lot. If I want my visit completion to look exactly like this total visits, I can either go through and make this bold and find the same color and, you know, do all those little steps to make it look exactly the same. Or I can simply click on this one because I know that's what I want it to look like. Go to my home button. And then I've got this little paintbrush here and it's called the Format Painter. And it's basically what it's going to do is when I click on it, it copies all of the formatting in here. And then if I click it on the new column that I've created, it changes it. It even changes the alignment, it changes the color. Now it looks exactly like all the others. So it can just save you some time if you're kind of modifying your data set. It's kind of a neat trick. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to make an assumption. So I'm going to imagine that in my program, parents are complete visits once they reach 20 visits, let's say. So I want to know what percentage of visits each family or each person has completed. So this is just a super simple formula where I'm going to write the equal sign, and I want to make the calculation based off of what we see in their total visits column. So I'm going to take, when I click on this, it enters in the cell number. So I've got equals, and now it's filled in V2. And since I know I want to see the percentage completed, I'm going to divide by 20. So the divide symbol in Excel is this little slash right here. And then I type in 20. Now I've got this funny number here, which is a percentage, but I want to display it as a percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and click percent style. I don't know why that's 101. It looks like for some reason this is calculated as a portion of a visit. So that is really goofy. And that's probably something I'd want to just go back and maybe look at, but maybe in this program there's a way where you're getting hours or something. Anyway, but it is showing me the percentage completed, assuming that the total is 20. You can look up at the formula bar. Even though you see 101 here, that's the value or that's what's been calculated. If you look at the formula bar, you can see how we got there. So this is what I typed. I typed V2 divided by 20. Now the neat trick with doing this right in our database is if I go down and right click and kind of hover over that little box in the corner until I see the black cross. When I double click that, it fills it in all the way down to the bottom. Now this is really cool because it's actually updating as it goes. So you can see in my formula bar, I've got V3, V4, V5. So Excel knows that I'm doing it cell by cell. So it goes down each row and calculates the unique visit completion. So it's very cool that it just knows how to do that. And I've done this kind of just with 2 clicks of a mouse.
Question.
Yeah.
So how do you change the decimal into the percentage sign again?
Oh yeah. So
Formulated, it turns into a decimal.
yes. So if you go up to the home ribbon up here and you go to this number area, you're going to see some options. I just clicked on this percentage because I knew that's a very common one. But you can also click, like if I wanted to go back, I think it was just calling it a number before. I had 1.01. But to change it to percentage, you would just click on that little icon, or you can select percentage from this drop down here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. And also sometimes numbers will display with decimals. And in this case, that's like not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead over to this little area here. You can see when I hover, it says decrease decimal and increase decimal. So I want to reduce, I don't want to see decimals. So I'm going to click it twice and they disappear. So that's just another neat one to know about.
Sorry, can you repeat what you did for the formula to continue all the way down?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back. Okay. So again, we've got our formula. We did it just based on one cell. And this is the same thing. It's basically like telling Excel to copy this formula, but the way this formula is written, it's going to update as it goes down. So to do that, I did the same trick as I showed you before, where I pulled down the data or the information all the way down. So we'll hover over this cell, move the cursor to the right until we've got that black cross, and then double click. And it should pull it down and make these unique formulas all the way down the column.
Great, thank you.
I guess wow, I'm all the way at the beginning. If you could repeat, what is so how do you add, this is under, I'm in the Y column under average visit completion.
Yes.
Now, this is what percentage of the value or the equation you're adding, or formula, excuse me, you're adding is based on what percentage of the visits have been completed. How do you add that? It is just V2, because I know here for the total client, it was equal and then count. And then for the total members, it was a sum. What is it for the average visit completion?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, we had to calculate kind of these averages. First, we kind of wanted to look at them, and now we're going to click here, do our equals. And actually, it's just using the word average. So I'm going to type in average, or again, I'm seeing it here. I can double click, and I'm going to pull all the way down to pull all this back up. So I've got my average W2 to W85. I'll close my parentheses and click enter. And then it will take the averages across all of these and say, great, the average visit completion of my whole data set is 87%. You could also do the same thing and just confirm that you've done it correctly by dragging all the way down your data. And remember, looking in this case, this is a simple calculation, so you'll see it down here as well. This is the average of the selected cells. So we can say, oh yeah, I guess we did type that formula incorrectly. I'm seeing the same number across the cells and then in this cell as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to show you two last formulas as the end of our little formula teaser before we wrap up here. So the last two are also really helpful. As we all know, we want to be looking at data in different ways sometimes. So maybe beyond just total family members, we also want to see the biggest family size that's in our data set and the smallest. So that is simply doing our max and min formulas. So I'm going to type the equals. Type in max. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at my total family size. So I know I want to look at the data here. You can see it's U2 through U85. Looks like my max number is 8. So I want to show you one thing that's, you could drag this down if I know I want to do the same thing. But this is important to notice. If you copy and paste a formula, we see a difference here. I've got U2 through U85, and if I just pull this down, it's actually changed it. Excel is thinking I want to do U3 through U86. So this is just a word of caution that formulas can be, like, it's really great when Excel changes it based on each row, but it also changes it based on each row. And here we're looking for a summary. So we actually wouldn't want to use this formula. We'd want to go back and say, and you can, whenever you click on it, you can see too that it's showing me where it's been highlighted and we're missing this person right here. So we want to go back and change this from U3 to U2 and again to U85. So it's always just good to double check and make sure you have selected the right area, especially if you're ever copying and pasting formulas around, because it's really easy to miss a small detail and unintentionally calculate a different area. So again, we were trying to calculate the min. I just copied and pasted it. I fixed the area, but I haven't changed the command. So I need to come back here, and instead of writing max, I'm going to change this to min. And it doesn't matter, capitals don't matter when you're doing formulas. Excel will just fix it for me after I press enter. So if I go back here and look, Excel's fixed that and made that all capitals, but it's telling me that the minimum family size is 2. So now I've calculated my visit completion and done a couple quick formulas here to get some like overview looks at my data set over on the right-hand side. Any questions with any of those that we just covered?
Yes, I missed the part where you calculated the average visit.
This part right here. Or did you mean the visit completion column on column W?
I think our friend is muted. They kind of cut off on it suddenly.
Oh, shoot. I believe that was Tina. Tina, if you want to try chatting it in the chat, we weren't able to hear the rest of that.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, I just lost the part where how'd you get that total calculation for average visit completion?
Great. So this box right here is the fix.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, so this one is just using the formula command average.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if we just start over on that, we had to calculate this column first because that wasn't there in our data set. Then if I want to calculate the average across this column, I'm going to type the equals sign, write average, my open parentheses, pull down all the way from W2 to W85. You can see W2 to W85 and then close my parentheses here. And when I press enter, I've got my 87%, which is the average distribution for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Audrey, can you go through and do the visit completion column once again?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete that. And you can see actually when I delete that, now this formula is confused. It's saying I can't divide nothing out of nothing. So it's giving me an error. So I would, in this case, I know I need to re-enter my formulas and that will fix this error right here. So as a reminder, I was sort of making this up, but I was imagining that in my program, like fully complete is have a family who's done 20 visits. So I'm using that as my number that I'll divide. So I'll start with the equals. And to get that percentage, I want to take the number of visits they've done divided by my total, which I know is 20. And again, because we have these weird partial numbers in here, which I have to investigate, we've got this 101, but this is telling me that I've got the correct visit completion. Now, if I want to fill that all the way down, I'm going to go ahead and move my cursor over to the little box on the right-hand side, and I'm going to double click. And when I double click, you can see that it's, if I click a random one, it's updated each cell based on the one that's next to it. So it's saying, okay, for this cell, I want to pull the cell that's next to it and divide that by 20 to get my numbers. And then you can see over here, it's actually fixed this formula because now they can do those divisions. Awesome. Well, I'm going to just mention one last thing, and then we can certainly stay on if anyone has a specific question. The last thing I was just going to say, Excel is kind of like a lifelong journey. I feel like I still am learning a lot about Excel every day. And there's no way that you're going to keep all these functions or formulas in your head. So usually when I'm looking for help, I think Google's the best. There is this little help ribbon over here. I don't really use that. I like to Google like the exact problem I'm having because there's other people who've had that problem too. So I might Google, why do my cells show number signs, for example, and realize like, oh, that's because I just need to resize them. Like usually the Googling it with your exact question is a great way to find some answers or videos. I really love finding different people's answers on YouTube. You can do the built-in support in Excel. Sometimes people find that helpful. I will also say that we've got a couple of resources which I'll share on our screen. We put together a page on our website that has some of our old class recordings going over some of these topics. And also we have some other short videos for common questions that we get as well. So definitely feel free to check those out. I'm going to go ahead and share that screen here while also mentioning that Jen is going to drop the evaluation link in the chat, and we will absolutely love it if you are able to fill that out. So we do look at each and every evaluation that we receive, because we're always kind of tweaking our classes to make sure they're fitting people's needs. So we really appreciate it. It shouldn't take longer than like 5 minutes, something like that. So we'll let you go off to the rest of your day, but happy to stick around if folks have specific Excel questions. Mostly, we just want to thank you all for spending your time here with us this afternoon. Know your time is valuable and appreciate the chance to learn from each other.